No wake. Jayden and Hannah moved to Amber Falls at the end of October, a small town in Virginia with fewer than 4,000 people. Online, it was described as quiet, cheap, and safe. A 2-bedroom house with a basement and a yard cost less than their burned-out 1-bedroom apartment in the suburbs. They didn't hesitate. At first, everything seemed fine. Clean streets, fresh paint on fences, neat lawns. People were polite, said hello, but never got too close. The whole place felt abandoned, not because it was empty, but because no one was ever in a hurry. No traffic, no kids yelling, not even dogs barking. The house itself was perfectly normal. Clean walls, no drafts, basic furniture but in good shape. No mold, no smell. That first week, they just rested. Hannah slept 10 hours a night. Jayden tried applying to local jobs, but every email bounced back. Recipient not found. He assumed it was just a glitch. The internet was spotty, but usable. The signal only worked near the window. On the third day, he noticed something odd. 3 cars were parked across the street, perfectly aligned. None of them moved. Not in the morning, not at night. Next day, they were still there. Same spots. Hannah went to the only store in town. It was small, with a low ceiling, almost too organized. She picked up basic items: bread, milk, eggs. Everything was there, but none of the packages had expiration dates. Just letters. No numbers. She asked the cashier how much it all cost. He didn't answer right away, just stared. Then gave her a total, but didn't say for what. She paid and left. On the 4th day, Jayden realized the town was completely silent. No engines, no dogs, no doorbells. Even his own voice sounded muffled, like the walls were absorbing it. He tried the radio, just ambient music. No hosts, no news. The TV showed reruns. Wrong time zone. Same shows, on repeat. It started to bother him that both of them were waking up at exactly 7 a.m. No alarm. Didn't matter when they went to sleep. The lights in their room would turn on automatically. At first, it felt convenient. Then it felt wrong. On the 6th day, he left town on foot. Just walked. No cars, no people. After 40 minutes, he turned back. The shadow from the street lamp hadn't moved. The time on his phone hadn't changed. He thought maybe the battery had died, but it was full. And the clocks in the house hadn't moved either. When he told Hannah, she didn't act surprised. She just asked, "Are you sure we even moved here?" Day 7, Jayden decided he was going to drive out of town. Not because he was spooked or anything. He just wanted to see how long it would take to get to the nearest main highway. He got behind the wheel early. Hannah stayed back at the house. Said she was feeling a bit weak and didn't want to go out. He drove down Main Street, the one he remembered leading out of town. Woods on either side. No birds, no animals. The trees stood too perfectly still. 20 minutes in, he realized he'd already passed familiar turns. Everything looked the same. He turned on the GPS. No signal. His phone was showing searching, and the battery had dropped 40% in those 20 minutes. 40 minutes later, he saw the "Welcome to Amber Falls" sign again, the same one he'd driven past on the way out. Only now it was on the other side of the road. He'd driven in a circle, without making a single turn. When he got back, Hannah was sitting on the floor in the hallway. She said she'd heard someone walking around inside the house. Not outside. Inside. The footsteps weren't heavy, but they followed routes that neither she nor Jayden ever took. Like someone was trying not to disturb them, but not trying to hide either. They checked the whole house. Nobody. No footprints. No open windows. But all the doors inside were closed. They never used to close them. Day 8, Jayden woke up in the middle of the night. He didn't know what time it was because his phone screen wouldn't turn on. It was black, like it was on, but showing nothing. He got up and went to the kitchen. From the hallway, he saw Hannah standing by the window, just standing there, staring out into the dark. He called her name softly, but she didn't respond. He walked closer and put his hand on her shoulder. She flinched and spun around sharply. I was just looking. There. I saw myself, but outside. They didn't talk about it anymore that night, just went back to bed. In the morning, they both acted like nothing had happened. Day 9, when they stepped outside, there weren't any cars on the street. Not a single one. They were all gone. The 3 cars that had been parked across the way all week had vanished. The houses opposite looked shut up tight. Not even curtains in the windows. Hannah said her head was buzzing, like a radio tuned between stations. When Jayden tried to call emergency services, his phone just froze. The screen went blank, white. No sound, no signal, no error message. He restarted it, and the battery dropped another 40%. Day 10, he told his sister it was time to leave. On foot, any direction. She agreed. They packed backpacks with warm clothes and water. They set off at noon. 3 hours of walking later, they ended up back on the same street they'd started on. They hadn't made any turns, just walked straight ahead, back to their own front yard. After they got back to their house, it was clear that walking out of town wasn't going to work. They didn't discuss it much, just went back inside and didn't try to leave again. With each passing day, the town got quieter. Fewer people on the streets. The cars stayed put. Sometimes someone would walk by, but always silent and unhurried. Nobody looked their way. The internet still worked, but it was slow. Email wouldn't load. The news websites showed old articles, the same ones. The TV just played reruns. No commercials, no news breaks. All the content was the same, like it was pre-recorded. The mailbox stayed empty. No letters, no flyers, not even bills. At the store, the cashier was there at first. Then he just disappeared. The lights stayed on. The shelves were stocked. They left money on the counter and walked out. Nobody stopped them. Their phones started acting weird. Some apps wouldn't open. Photos in the gallery vanished. All that was left were black screens and file names without images. Hannah stopped using her phone altogether. Over time, they both started forgetting ordinary things. What day of the week it was, how long they'd been there, when they'd last spoken to anyone on the phone. Everything about their old lives was getting fuzzy. They went outside less and less. Didn't feel like going for walks. The weather never changed, always overcast, but no rain or snow. The temperature stayed the same. One night, the power went out in the house. Jayden grabbed a flashlight, but the beam was weak, even with fresh batteries. He checked on Hannah. She was sitting on the floor in her room. He asked what was wrong. She said she couldn't remember where they had lived before. He didn't say anything and went back to his own room. The day after the power went out, Jayden noticed there were fewer things in the house. 2 mugs had vanished, and one of the chairs was gone. They hadn't thrown anything out or moved any furniture. Things just weren't where they were supposed to be, or they'd disappear completely. Hannah stopped using her room, said it had gotten too quiet in there, and it made her uneasy. The bed looked different. The sheets were a different color. She said they'd never had those sheets. Jayden didn't remember buying or changing anything either. 2 days later, the kettle was gone from the kitchen. In its place on the counter was a thermos. Metal, scuffed up, old-fashioned. They hadn't brought it with them. Inside was water that smelled metallic. The fridge only had the basics left, stuff that didn't need cooking. Everything else had just gone. They didn't discuss when it had happened, just noticed that the food was always the same now. It didn't spoil, but it didn't get used up either. They were eating less than usual. The mirror in the bathroom was gone, just a blank wall. No marks, no sign it had ever been there. They both noticed, but didn't say anything. On the 4th day, Jayden tried to find the flashlight. It had been in a drawer in the pantry, but now all that was in there was a yellow pencil and a broken ruler. Nothing else. Some of the doors in the house were getting harder to open, like they were resisting. Especially the pantry and the basement, which they hadn't been down to since they moved in. Now it smelled damp. They tried not to touch anything they didn't need to, just used what was within reach. No new things appeared and the old ones kept vanishing. After a while, they started remembering recent events differently. For example, Jayden would say they'd spent the whole evening in their room. Hannah would insist they'd gone outside and talked by the gate. He had no memory of that. One day, Hannah mentioned someone they'd apparently spoken to recently. Jayden had no idea who she was talking about. She said it was their neighbor, the one they'd seen at the store. He was certain he hadn't seen any neighbors, and they hadn't been to the store. They began to recall their move differently. Jayden remembered them driving straight there and staying. Hannah believed they'd come for a look around first, then gone back home, and only moved in properly a week later. Both of them spoke with conviction. When they argued, each of them felt like they were telling the truth. But neither could prove anything. There were no notes, no photos, no documents or messages. It was like they'd never existed. Conversations got shorter and shorter. They tried not to press each other on details. Just silently accepted that they remembered things differently. One morning, Jayden couldn't immediately recall his own name. It happened in the bathroom. He was looking in the mirror and felt like something was wrong. The name came back, but not right away. He decided not to mention it to Hannah. A day later, she forgot how old she was. First she said one number, then another. Then she just asked him. He told her she was 27. She nodded, but looked like she didn't really care. Sometimes one of them wouldn't immediately recognize the other. Just for a few seconds, their gaze would go blank, like they were looking at a stranger. Then it would pass. They both noticed it happening. They both started having these gaps, short ones, just a couple of seconds. You could be standing there and just forget why you'd walked into the room. or wake up and not know where you were. At first it was scary, then it just wasn't. They talked even less, avoided topics that required remembering things. It was easier to just be silent. They started writing down their names, stuck little notes to the wall by the front door. In the morning, the names would be different. No signs of being changed, just different. The handwriting was unfamiliar. Hannah wasn't sure how to spell her own last name at one point. Said she'd always been a bit unsure, but it had never bothered her before. They didn't separate into different rooms anymore. Spent almost all their time in the same one. Didn't discuss why. It just felt easier when the other person was there. For the past week, Hannah had barely spoken. Not out of tiredness or resentment. Silence had just become her default. It was like she understood everything now and was just waiting for something. Her movements were soft, careful. She'd get up earlier than usual and sit by the window for ages, not looking outside, just sitting there, hands folded in her lap, like she was waiting for a signal only she could hear. That day, she cleaned the whole house, calmly, without rushing. Put things back in their places, folded the clothes neatly. Everything looked like she was getting ready to leave, except without a suitcase. Towards evening, she made tea. She and Jayden sat by the fireplace until late. They talked. It felt strange, too nice, too warm. They hadn't talked like that in a long time. It felt like it might be the last time, but he didn't dwell on it. At one point, Hannah hugged him tightly, for a long time, tighter than usual, without saying a word. That night, Jayden woke up to a strange silence. The house was plunged in darkness. He looked over at Hannah's bed. The duvet was folded neatly. The pillow was straight. Not a trace of her. He walked through the whole house. The rooms were empty. The lights came on with a delay. Not a single sign she was there. On the living room windowsill lay her pendant, the one she always wore. No chain, cold to the touch. There was nothing else left. In the morning, he waited for her to come back. Maybe she'd just gone for a walk. She didn't always say where she was going, could just slip out to run errands or take a stroll. Quiet, as always. He waited for the sound of footsteps, the creak of the door, any little thing. But the house was too quiet, too empty. He called her name. No response. He listened. No creaking floorboards, no running water, not even the sound of his own breathing. Everything felt too muted, like sound had become thinner than usual. He started searching. Methodically at first, room by room. Closets, drawers, under the bed, behind the doors. Then faster. Not so much to find her anymore, but to keep from going crazy in the silence. Nothing. There wasn't a single thing left in the house that reminded him of her. Not even a hair on her brush. Everything had been cleaned, effortlessly, without a trace, like she hadn't left, but had never lived there at all. He went outside. The weather was the same as always, like it was frozen in time. No wind. The trees didn't move. He walked down the road, peered into the windows of other houses. No people, no shadows. Even the houses seemed fewer than he remembered, or maybe it was just getting harder to count them. When he got back, he looked through the house again. The things she'd folded the day before were gone. All that was left was the bed. And the air. Dry, colorless, holding no memories. He sat down by the wall. His back ached with tiredness. His head was buzzing. But there were no thoughts. Just one. She hadn't just left. She knew she was going, and he hadn't known he would be left behind. He didn't look for explanations anymore, didn't try to figure out where she was. Time passed, and it became clear she wasn't coming back, and most likely she never would. He kept living, not for any particular reason, just because the days kept going. He'd get up, eat, go outside, walk the same routes. Sometimes he'd change the order. It made it easier not to think. Sometimes he'd look at the faces of passers-by for a long time, and still, no face looked familiar. He didn't expect to find her, but he couldn't help but look. A few times he thought he saw her, in the distance, among a crowd of people. He'd follow the silhouette, quietly, without any real hope, and it always turned out he was wrong. But he kept doing it. He didn't know why he was still doing what he was doing. Didn't know why he went to sleep or why he woke up. But he did. He didn't talk about her out loud, not even to himself. He knew he remembered, but he could feel the memories getting blurry. They weren't fading, just drifting further away. Sometimes in his dreams, he'd see the town, a crowd, ordinary people. Someone would turn around. He felt like he should recognize her, but he couldn't remember her name. Every time he'd wake up with that feeling, and nothing else would happen. He opened his eyes. Light stabbed at his face, harsh, cold, white ceiling, no seams, strange sounds, a faint beeping, voices behind a partition. He didn't know where he was. He tried to move, could only wiggle his fingers. The room smelled of medicine. The air was dry. Somewhere nearby, a chair creaked. Footsteps approached. Someone's voice said he was awake. He heard, but didn't react. His head felt heavy, like he hadn't slept, but had been lying in the depths of something thick. Memories flickered back in jolts. The house, fire, her face, then emptiness. A doctor approached him, calm, holding a file. He explained slowly. There had been a fire. He'd been unconscious for 57 days. Hannah hadn't made it. Her body had been. He opened his eyes. Light hit his face, sharp, cold, white ceiling, no seams, strange sounds, a muffled beep, someone's voices beyond a partition. He didn't understand where he was. He tried to move, could only wiggle his fingers. The room smelled of medicine. The air was dry. Somewhere nearby, a chair creaked. Footsteps approached. Someone's voice said he was awake. He heard, but didn't react. His head was heavy, like he hadn't slept, but had been lying in the depths of something dense. Everything bad came back in flashes. The house, fire, her face, then emptiness. A doctor approached him, calm, holding a file. He explained slowly. There had been a fire. He'd been unconscious for 57 days. Hannah hadn't survived. Her body had been found right away. He'd been found later, in critical condition, but alive. He didn't answer, just listened, his gaze fixed on the ceiling. When the doctor left, a nurse placed a small, clear bag on the bedside table. Inside lay her pendant. He picked it up, looked at it for a long time, then clenched his fist around it. Everything that had happened became clear. Not all at once, but clearly. It hadn't been delirium, not a dream. Just time that had been given to him, so that he could